And we've got two amazing leaders here today who have recently stepped up to new roles. Kumsal is the new CEO of Elsevier since February. Elsevier is an information analytics company that is one of the major providers of technical, medical, and scientific information worldwide. She also sits on the technology forum of the group of Relax, which is listed on the FTSE and is roughly about 8 billion. On my right-hand side, I've got Wendy, who's recently been appointed head of all EMEA and Russia for Cisco. That's the second largest region worldwide, 10 billion, 123 countries, 13,000 people. She's also the exec sponsor of the Women's Connection Community Program. So first of all, congratulations to this brilliant panel and for stepping up to the new roles. So today is really about leadership with change, and we all know that leadership is really hard. The same challenges that are facing you are facing people in the audience. This is going to be quite dramatic, as Kumsal said, but you know, political instability, the world's incredibly complex, demographic shifts, disruptive companies coming through, and all that you have to lead. So as you both recently stepped up into new roles, I would love to hear your initial views on what are some of the key strategic decisions that you're considering to make. Let's start with you, Wendy, since you're longer in the role.
Not that much longer, but happy to go first. So, you know, I think it's really important, you know, certainly for me, I've been in the role now for 10 months. And if I look at that, things that are really important are, you know, listening to what's really happening in the industry, listening to your customers, be those external and internal, listening to the key transitions and how you capture those. And if I look for us within Cisco, we're going through a significant transformation at the moment as a result of the changing dynamics in the market, but also with our customers. So how we manage that and that shift of moving towards much more of a software-centric organization is an important transition for us that looks at how we innovate, how we partner, but also the skills and the capability of our people as well.
Because I think about roughly 30% of the revenue will be put towards this new software shift.
Correct, and it's more accelerated than that as well, actually. And if you look for us as we've grown over the years, we grow through acquisition, through our own internal development, and also through partnering as well. So that also introduces many different dynamics for both your portfolio as you drive that change, linking those items together, but also for your skills and your people, the capability that you have on board with your teams.
Right, so I mean, Cisco's renowned for build, partner, build, like you said. And if you're trying to start creating more innovation internally, how do you get 13,000 people to think differently around a new culture, a new way of thinking, if you're going towards a software, direction?
Yeah, you know, if I look at any transformation, the most important thing is culture and your people, and keeping your people with you on the journey as you go through these different dynamics. And, you know, if I look for ours, especially as we have in managing with each of those aspects, and you acquire innovation, but also people as you go through those steps, and you have your existing talent that you have within the organization, and you're hiring new people in as well. Managing all of those steps is important, and keeping people connected to an overall culture and set of common values and frameworks. So that's the most important thing, I believe, as a leader.
Yeah, and we'll come back to the people, because I think it's a really good topic. Kumsal, you haven't had 10 months, you've had 3 months. So I'm going to be very generous with you.
Oh, thank you.
Very kind.
What are your views?
Kind.
What are views?
Yeah, I'm coming up to 4 months, actually,
Okay.
so I already have all the experience you need. Like Wendy, I'm very much focusing on innovation at Elsevier as well, and there's a lot of cultural implications of that. You need to create a culture where people are agile, they are comfortable making decisions. You have to remove this fear of failure. So there's risk-taking. I say calculated risk-taking. Don't bet the farm, but we need to be taking risks every day, and if it doesn't work, we pivot and we try something else. I mean, Elsevier, you asked about early observations, has great assets. We have incredibly competitively differentiated content sets and data sets. We built some fantastic technology capabilities over the last decade, primarily in artificial intelligence technologies. And we have 7,500 incredibly passionate people who care about advancing science and health with our customers, with scientists and doctors. So we have all the right ingredients, but we also have very established, mature business models, and we need to disrupt them ourselves. And that's not easy, to make sure you still keep going what pays the bills, but you bring disruption into the company, so you disrupt yourself instead of others disrupting you.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned sort of the importance of AI, and you know, in a way, it's been a word that's been used a lot. Relax did a recent study that showed that 88% of all senior executives believe that AI will improve the competitiveness of the business, but only 39% of them thought that actually maximize the value. So let me quickly turn to you, to Kumsal. Why is there this gap between actually not delivering on it, and what have you seen actually really work? Like, what actually pragmatically works with AI?
Sure. I mean, you asked if AI, ML is an overused word. I don't think so at all. ML and AI are actually very established technologies in our business that we use constantly to improve what we're providing to the customers. Because we're a content and data business, that comes maybe more naturally to us. We've always worked with natural language processing. We now work with speech recognition, image recognition, machine learning, supervised and unsupervised learning models to really mine this incredible wealth we have in what used to be text. Now you can analyze like data with artificial intelligence technologies. So it's quite embedded in our business, but it takes a long time. Because initially, technology is a buzzword, and Wendy, you, I know, care a lot about use cases. So you need to understand what's the customer need, what's the use case, and the technology is actually an enabler. Yeah. So you have to build that connections between your technology teams who understand the technology and your product and market guys who understand the needs, and figure out how they can together work on solving customer problems. We serve multiple industries at RELX. We serve insurance, financial services, science, lawyers across the globe, and I see different levels of maturity in the adoption of AI and ML technologies. It won't surprise you, insurance is one of the most advanced, because it's an industry that very much runs on modeling and risk assessment and crunching data, so you can see how AI and ML can help that. And to give you a specific example, we have products that helps insurance companies price the risk of a driver so they can sell them auto insurance. And we now use technology called telematics that actually are either in your vehicle or they're in your smartphone, so that the risk of you can be calculated based on your actual driving behavior instead of past accidents you had, in my case, 5 of them, so that doesn't give me a cutting edge when it comes to insurance, or your demographic. So that is a real value to the company and to the customer, because you can actually price the risk based on actual behavior using machine learning.
You got to make sure to know who's driving the car, though,
You don't
right?
want me driving, for sure.
And so speaking of user cases, you had a few, right? If you think about Cisco is at the backbone of all infrastructure. So, you know, what are some good use cases that you've seen where it works?
So, you know, if I look, so there's a couple of things that are important. Depending on the organization will be at different stages to be able to absorb and, you know, progress from an innovation standpoint. So some companies are absolutely want to be in the leading seat around that change. Some will be more in what we call fast follower, you know, so wanting to understand the next group. So it's understand where your organization might be. When we talk with our customers, it's very much gauging that with them is important. And then if you look at the use case is mapping and understanding the relevance of that innovation to a specific environment. And certainly if you look by vertical industry, so for example in retail, if you look within the banking sector, if you look within manufacturing, wow, listen to that rain, and also utility, there's a huge amount of examples there for things such as, you know, we're showcasing downstairs around facial recognition. Right. You know, how can you leverage facial recognition with collaboration, technology and innovation so that you can understand more about the people that you are meeting prior to engaging with them in a collaborative conversation, leveraging video capability, but also getting some insights in advance on the individuals that you will be meeting with. And then also situations where if you look leveraging AI for understanding root cause analysis and diagnostics as well within the infrastructure environment and linking the requirement of the application to the infrastructure quickly as well, so that you can benefit from the fact that the software can learn, can adapt, can understand, and you can get to root cause very, very quickly. So lots of examples of where the innovation is used in order to link to an organization, and either making sure you're maintaining uptime, you're maintaining the speed by which you're processing transactions, but also there'll be situations around health and safety within environments as well. So many examples that
So let's go with this, where it could go.
Yeah.
I mean, Kumsal, if you think about this whole debate around human judgment and AI, and we'll get to smart cities in a second, because that's the question that I think everyone wants to ask, is will AI overcome human judgment? So I think part of the companies that Relax owns is Elsevier, which is all about legal. Will we have sort of a AI judge sitting there making decisions for us in the future?
Yeah, no, I don't think we'll have an AI judge sitting there making decisions. I actually think AI will not replace human judgment. Never say never, but that's my personal view. I think AI will automate routine knowledge tasks so that human brain can focus on creativity, innovation, negotiation, things that actually require not routine work, but a lot of creativity. Karim's asking about judges, because we now have, we've been innovating in our legal business, and we can predict a judge's decision on a case based on the facts of the case and their previous decisions that they've taken in similar cases. Now, will that ever replace a judge's judgment on the case? I don't think so. Can it improve the judge's judgment? Yes, because the judge can look at what the algorithms predict the decision would be, how other judges would have decided in that case, and then they can actually use judgment to understand if this is a decision that needs to differ or be the same as other judges, and really think through the complexity of that. But I think AI can improve our decision-making significantly. As you know, there's also a lot of debate on, is AI going to, take out employment entirely? I've read doom case scenarios saying 35 to 50% of all employment may be replaced by AI, depending on which country and which industry you look at. But I've also read a lot that says actually AI will create more employment, because that's been the history of technological innovation. Whenever there's a breakthrough technology innovation, there's displacement, but there's also more employment. And it won't surprise you that it's usually the technologists who have the pessimistic case, and it's usually the economics and the historians that have more the optimistic case. So I don't think it will replace human judgment.
So you give me confidence as a consultant I'm not going to be replaced.
I think that's the case, unfortunately.
Smart cities.
Yeah.
Is it really actually happening? There's like smart hospitals, ability to detect pollution levels, so different citizens then can have curated healthcare personalized to them based on sort of how meters collect the information. I mean, where is smart cities going? Where is London going to be in sort of 5 years' time?
Yeah, I mean, I would say absolutely smart cities are, out there active, all across the world. And, if we look at examples in the UK, in Manchester, there is, highly leveraged smart city capability. And a lot of again, back to the use cases there are around safety of the citizen. And how can you ensure that you are making sure that people within the city have a set of knowledge and awareness, of their surroundings and individuals as well. If you look in Paris, the capability around how do you actually route traffic through the city in an effective and an efficient manner. In Barcelona, around smart smart garbage collection, smart parking. There's many different examples, and and I think we're just at the beginning of where we can continue to imagine different possibilities.
Okay, I'll tell you what really freaks me out. Black Mirror, which is about the use of technology for like bad things, and of course you can use AI for good or for bad, and so. With smart cities, or even sort of the impact that you have in dealing with infrastructures, cybersecurity has been coined as the new arms race. It's happening to all companies. It's happening on a global market with sort of countries as well. What are your customers saying around cybersecurity? What's worrying them?
So I think that as you connect more things to each other and have more more vectors by which there can be threat and challenge, you have to have a a very strong awareness of that. We all need to, and to make sure that we understand the potential challenge, both we talk about before, during, and after. Any incident or situation may occur. So making sure that you plan, you architect, you design upfront with absolute mindfulness from a secure standpoint within your environment is important. And if I look at the way in which technology has been innovated over time, and we have some scenarios where, if you look at Facebook as an example, that has been was introduced many years ago as a platform by which people would be able to share with each other. We have within Cisco an environment called Talos. Talos is a set of cyber competency where we have access to all of the detail. You can imagine the industry that we are in around threats, around malware and challenges. So, we worked extensively with the Talos team, with Facebook, and identified that, that environment that was built for sharing of information in detail, there were a number of 75 different families, for want of a better term, were introduced on that environment, involving 385,000 people, where it was actually cybercrime was underway. So share of personalized detail, fraudulent information across that. So once we identified that, we were able to work with Facebook to have that removed. And another example, we were talking about this earlier, is around identity fraud.
Right.
Whoever you are talking to may not be the person that you believe, is in that role or that situation. So being aware and understanding that is critical. We all use lots of different chat tools and environments today, and who you think you might be connecting with
may not be
that person.
Yeah, I think, Kumsal, you coined the word morally paranoid in terms of your approach to cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And then if you kind of cross the bridge of identity, I mean, you guys...
Sure. I mean, we also have a lot of identity fraud services that we provide to our customers so they can detect fraud when it's happening. And I said to you, Karim, before, I think we all need to be in a constant state of paranoia when it comes to cybersecurity, because unfortunately, these criminals are incredibly sophisticated and they innovate constantly different ways of accessing our information. So I think morally and intellectually and physically, we need to live in a constant state of paranoia. At RELX, we try to do a lot around prevention, detection, and mitigation, the three pillars. And I always think of it as a house. So first, you need to make sure you do everything you can from preventing anybody coming in. Then you need to make sure you have everything possible to detect the minute somebody comes in, because you can mitigate the time that they've spent in the house. And then you need to mitigate it by segmenting, maybe I would say, lock every room in the house so that if they get to a room, they can't get to the other room. So there's a lot that we do around data segmentation. So God forbid, if an incident happens, you can actually mitigate the impact by ensuring that it's a smaller data set versus a larger data set.
And most of the errors are human errors, right? It's a lot of phishing.
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately, phishing, I'm sure we do a lot of training with our employees. We do constant phishing tests. People who fail it actually get trained again. If you fail it more than twice, there are consequences. So it creates paranoia in our employees as well, too. But human error is one of the easiest ways to break the chain. So we all have to be on high alert all the time.
And there's also that situation to your house analogy. There may well be somebody is in your house already and you don't realize, because the threat comes from within. And as we're connecting more and more things, in devices that you would never have thought would ever be connected, that's your own secure environment, plus those of other organizations and partners that are connecting you to as well. You have to have all of that detail too.
Absolutely, because you're opening more doors.
Yeah.
So I'd love to shift this last third of the conversation around both of you, around purpose and around Kumsal and Wendy. And so I kind of set the scene at the beginning that leadership is tough, because not only are you supposed to be delivering performance and deal with transformation because you're disrupted, but then doing it in a way that drives purpose. And that, again, is another, whether it's a buzzword or not, is everyone's thinking about it, which is the ability to contribute back, not only to your own organization, but have greater contribution to society and communities. Let me start with you, because we've briefly talked about this, but what is leadership with purpose?
And purpose is so important, and this is increasingly more important as younger generations come in terms of doing your very best and getting engaged. We know that engagement drives performance and purpose drives engagement. At Elsevier, I almost feel embarrassed that we have it easy because we are in an industry that's about advancing science and health. So our people genuinely care about that. They care about science, they care about discoveries, they care about connecting the dots, they care about supporting the scientists so they can actually connect the dots. And same thing on the healthcare side, we care about improving patient outcomes and improving patient care. So that is an incredible asset and a blessing we have at Elsevier, so people feel really connected to what they do on a day-to-day basis. So for me, that's really important because every time I meet with a customer, I feel very energized about the possibilities of how we can help them advance science and healthcare. I also, on a personally as well, I care about developing women so we can see more senior women in the world. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet Wendy through this process. So that is something that also gives me purpose at work. I sometimes say, I said a few times, I'm more excited about becoming a female CEO than about becoming a CEO. So that's something that gives me a lot of purpose at work to develop younger women so that they can get senior positions in the company as well.
Yeah, and same question to you on purpose, but also I know you're incredibly motivated and sort of inspiring to many other women as well. But so what is Cisco doing in terms of purpose, and then how do you attract greater talent as well?
Yeah, I mean, if I look on the purpose piece and building on some of Kumsal's comments, within Cisco we have, so again, there's the same dynamics. Our teams want more, our people want more, and want to feel it's not just about a job anymore, it's about more, more than that, and being able to bring their full selves to the workplace and the environment. And what we have done is we've introduced, as part of our corporate social responsibility program, our people can take 5 days a week, so 5 days during the calendar year, in order to give back and to do that associated with any cause that is special for them. So it's the ability for them to have that choice. Is a powerful one. And something that we have recently done is we have invested in a broader partnership with Global Citizen. And Global Citizen is a scheme to try and reduce extreme global hunger by 2030. And just last week we announced some more investment towards that as a partnership. So there's some bigger items that we do as an organization globally, and then the ability for our people and our teams to have a level of their own choice around causes that are important for them as well.
And one of the things that we've learned as a firm working with CEOs worldwide for many, many years is that things have shifted where it's used to be command and control, and today it's much more around the more self-awareness and curiosity the leaders have, the greater chance they have to enable an organization, and that the learning never stops. I'd love to hear sort of what learnings have you had, and how is your leadership style going to continue over the next sort of, for your entire career? And how do you keep learning?
I think it's a journey, and it's constant learning. I always tell to people it's really important that you learn and evolve, but you also need to be authentic, and you need to keep what is the core of you and what makes you you. So it's that balance of evolving in areas we need to evolve, but making sure we're being authentic to ourselves. If you're asking me about I had incredible mentors and sponsors throughout my career that gave me really invaluable feedback. Some of them I chose to ignore, and I'm glad I did. I was told early on in my career that I'm too nice to advance into a leadership position, and I felt I can continue to be nice and also be an effective leader. But I also got some really good advice about letting go of control. The more senior you get, the more it's about empowering your people, creating accountability, and letting them run with things. And I tend to have a tendency to want to control everything. So that's something I had to learn over time to let go.
Yeah, and yourself?
I think it's accepting that it is continuous learning. And no one can ever know everything. And acknowledging that, listen to your teams, work with your team, and surround yourself by great people and people who are better than you. And then you will, you build that next wave of talent within the organization, and get them to work with each other on things as well, so that everyone thinks a level up from the seat that they're in today. And if you give that room to your team, they will really appreciate it.
Right. So final question, because I think we're out of time. you're not only great leaders in tech, but great women leaders in tech. What advice would you give to other women as they progress in their career?
I would say be your authentic self and go for it.
And not be nice, or sometimes.
I would say if you have an opportunity to live and work abroad, do it. And also, if you if you're presented with an opportunity, don't qualify yourself out straight away. Take a few risks in your career is important.
I can't thank you enough. It's the reason why we're so inspired is the fact that you guys, in my view, are the next wave of CEO leadership that not only are going to drive performance, transformation, but in a way that's incredibly meaningful and pushing the diversity angle. So thank you so much for your time, and let's give it a big round of applause.
Okay, and a big thank you to Kumsal, Wendy, and Karim for moderating. We're just going to do a very quick changeover of the microphones on the stage. And if you are staying in here, you are in for a treat because we have the future of work and impact on society. And I'll be introducing up our speakers in just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that short little bit of music. Sounds a little bit like, hold music for a telecoms company, but, very appropriate, of course. Probably artificially intelligently produced, no doubt. Our next section is on the future of work and the impact of society. And we have Phil Smith, who is the chairman and non-exec director of IQE. And he is going to introduce his remarkable panelists together. So over to you, please, Phil.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to have my panel here, and we are going to talk about the future of work and the impact in society, and we're going to do that in half an hour, okay? So maybe a bit of a challenge, so we're going to have to keep concise. We're going to have to obviously take time to try and get to the right areas, but I've got a wonderful panel here. Catherine Parsons, CEO of Decoded, who does some amazing work. Sir Nigel Shadbolt, Professor Sir Nigel Shadbolt from Oxford University, but also author and commentator significantly in this area. Jamie Suskin, who's, again, a significant commentator as well as a practicing barrister, I think. So coming from the family legacy there strongly. And of course, I'm sure many people will know Lord Peter Mandelson, who was, when I last met him, was the Secretary of State for the DTI, but of course has a very prestigious career over time. So we've got quite a number of perspectives here. We obviously want to get to the right issues in the right time. And I wanted to really make sure that we do start to get to the right issues, because there are a lot of issues in here. The future of work is a big topic and the impact it has in society. And I think it's probably the easiest way for us to start is to really think about, you know, the perspectives of what are really the issues here. What are the issues we're talking about? There's dystopian views and there's utopian views of what that future is going to be like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But we know whatever happens, there are going to be some significant changes. And Nigel, you've written quite extensively in your book about this balance between what could happen and what might actually happen. I wonder if you could just give us a little perspective on that. And in a sense of me, what are the things we really need to focus on?
Yeah, well, thank you, Phil. I mean, Naked Plug, The Digital Ape, available in a bookshop below us, apparently. But this is all about looking at the nature of being human in the 21st century, you know, how AI will impact us, the data science world we live in. But one, of course, is the various claims around work. There is a lot of hyperbole around this. You know, the idea that the robots are coming and to take our jobs. There's a very interesting sequence of front covers from Der Spiegel, the German magazine. 1960, 1970, 1980, the robots were always coming to take all of your jobs. The truth is that we're endlessly creative as a species about giving ourselves new things to do. We've actually, when you look at it, the essential jobs that keep us alive, well, in the US, 2 million people are employed in agriculture directly, 7 million employed in tourism directly, and 9 million people indirectly. We're extremely inventive about the intricacies of the future of work. And I think that as we move forward, we will see disruptions. We will see certain professions succumb, be algorithmized to some extent. But also we will create classes of profession we haven't thought of famously. And we as humans have massive issues that we care about in social care, health, education, tourism, the things that define us as humans, that we find endlessly novel ways to find wealth formats to reward people for. And in an age of third age, the third age model as well, people growing older, having a portfolio of jobs in later life, all sorts of new redistributions. So I'm not as gloomy or dystopian, but we do need to think about the skills we'll require for this new future. Well,
I think the skills is clearly a key area, and Catherine, I know it's an area you've massively passionately spoken about over the years. And I think, you know, there is something, and I'd certainly working with government, I chair the Digital Skills Partnership and various other things. There's clear desire to get us skilled up for the next generation, but I'm not quite sure we've got all the bits joined up yet. I mean, skills is clearly one of the key issues. Have you any perspectives on that you'd like to share?
Well, it's great that that is now being raised as an agenda. So people have been talking about the future of work, the fact that 50% of people are going to get replaced by machines in the next 10 years. For the last 4 or 5 years. And I think people are now at the point of saying, give me a roadmap. I want to know what the future of work looks like and how I can upskill and reskill to be part of it. So I want to change the language around automation and turn it into an opportunity. 50% of people can be upskilled and reskilled for the future of work. And at the moment, I think people are looking at that statistic of the 50% automation and assuming that that whole generation is going to be written off.
Yes.
We cannot wait for another generation to hit the workforce who are going to kind of solve the problems of today. So for me, the future of work debate is really about lifelong learning. And I think we're in the middle of an education revolution, really, as much as a technological revolution.
Yeah, and I think that is really important. That sense that we have got, I mean, I think the statistic I've quoted widely is that 80% of the workforce of 2030 are in the workforce. This is a reskilling challenge as well as a skills challenge throughout. But Peter, you must have heard this, many times over the years, people talking about these challenges and how we shape policy to try and address these sorts of issues for both the short term and the longer term. I mean, do you see any difference now? Does this feel radically different? Does it feel it's moving at a faster pace? What's your perspective?
This is about my sort of third or fourth time around this sort of cycle way. The first thing I did when I left university a very long time ago was write a report about youth unemployment. This is a very long time ago. And everyone was talking then about labor displacement, robots taking over, computers displacing labor, no future for young people. And of course, there was a future. And then I came into government, my first cabinet level in 1998, I produced a white paper called Building a Knowledge-Driven Economy. It was how government was going to help the acceleration of the diffusion of technology across our economy, but also addressing some of the social issues as well. And then, lo and behold, when the banking crisis came in 2008, I had to come back to government all over again, and we were facing the same sort of challenges, this time in the context of the banking crisis. I mean, I think that policymakers now are focused on sort of four key challenges in relation to technology and AI. One is, what is the tech world going to do to help governments assist sectors and groups of the population who are being threatened, who are being displaced? Obviously, there are two main drivers taking place here. One is the displacement of human labor, and the other is driving productivity. In the long term, both are likely to be positives for our economy and society. But in the short term, they're both disorienting and disruptive. So the question that policymakers pose to the tech community is, what's your responsibility in helping us cope with this? I think that the second is how, as you've said, the tech sector is going to help in the process of skilling and reskilling. The third is what the tech sector is going to do to contribute financially to help build and modernize an entirely new sort of welfare state. I think that, Europe's social welfare systems are already under huge pressure from aging populations, new forms and ways of working, the fiscal challenges that many are facing, and which we are going to face in this country if Brexit goes ahead. People want to know from the tech sector, which are very concentrated centers of value creation and accumulation in the form of the rewards that come from that, what contribution they're going to make, what they're going to give back. And I think next is this issue of a universal basic income. That is a huge question which addresses the issue of income redistribution, which is becoming yet again incredibly skewed by the advent and rollout of new technologies. Is it right in principle? Is it affordable in practice to apply universal basic income in order to put a floor underneath all those who live and work in society? And if so, who's going to pay for it?
Yeah, and also, there's a very good point. And of course, the question is, how quickly can we develop a policy like that? I mean, if you look at the moment, for example, there's a national retraining scheme. I mean, it's clearly a national retraining scheme, but it's still bogged down in policy discussions as to where it's actually going to go, how we're going to target it, and so on. So it's quite difficult to do. And Jamie, I mean, you've written and talked a lot about this kind of new ways of thinking about policy and how we could potentially both exploit the technology but also recognize its impact. I wonder whether you've got any sort of sense of whether the policy environment really can evolve quick enough to adapt to some of the things that Peter's laid out and the others have suggested so far.
Well, if I may, I'll try and be a little provocative about this.
Good.
You don't need to buy the thesis that 50% of us are going to be unemployed to recognize that technology poses a pretty serious challenge to the way that our economy is currently arranged. If it were the case, for instance, that even 5% or 10% of the public, for one reason or another, of working age, could not get a job at various points in their career, it would require a very different approach to the welfare state than we've been taking for the last century at least. Secondly, skills. Obviously, skills is going to be an important part of the policy response to technological unemployment. But what I argue in my book, Future Politics, is that it can be quite difficult to anticipate which skills are needed. We've thankfully moved beyond, I think, people saying that it's routine or manual jobs that are going to be automated first. We are far closer to automating the work of lawyers than we are of bricklayers or hairdressers. And there are already artificial intelligence systems which can better diagnose whether you have skin cancer or not, or predict your life expectancy than the best human doctors. So it's not immediately clear which groups in society are going to be affected first. And that makes policy planning difficult. And finally, if I may have my say briefly on this idea of universal basic income, I'm a skeptic of it because I wonder about the equity and efficiency of distributing money to people who don't need it. If, for instance, you own a tech firm or you own a piece of productive digital capital, it's not immediately clear to me why society should be redistributing its resources towards you. But what I'd add is this when it comes to universal basic income. Always listen to who it is who's doing the talking about it. Because the Silicon Valley vision of a universal basic income is one where you roll back the state and you give people money so that they can choose what to spend it on: education, healthcare, insurance, and the like. Whereas the left imagine that it's essentially the same welfare state that we already have, but everyone gets a few £1,000s in their pockets every month to spend if they happen to be out of work. And that's why it's an idea that feels like its time has come, but in many ways, I believe people are talking at cross purposes about it. And the very seductive Silicon Valley vision of it is not necessarily one that I think here in Europe we would find as attractive if the full implications of it were made clear.
No, an important point. I mean, I think, I don't know, Catherine, whether you've had any kind of sense of this. You deal with a lot of people through Decoded from, different environments. I mean, I often talk about the question of, how does the lorry driver in Sunderland feel about this discussion versus the person sitting here in a conference talking about AI who's very much on the inside of this discussion. So there's a set of disenfranchised communities where policy is very important to get the scale that we need, but it's also, quite challenging from a personal perspective for them really to buy into this. But do you see that variation in a significant way in the work you do?
I mean, I've definitely heard a lot of political leaders use the phrase that, well, I can't imagine a bus driver retraining to be a coder. And I just want to kind of debunk that a little bit. I think our perceptions of who this is for need to be reframed and reshaped. Tim Berners-Lee said technology is for everyone. I kind of want to start from that place. We're working with a lot of different businesses globally, and every single industry and every single sector you can possibly imagine, from graduate level up to the boards of these businesses. So we see a lot of different learners. And we've spoken to a lot of different HR directors, and a lot of them, especially the technology HR directors, are looking for, what are they looking for in terms of their future talent? Well, I think they're kind of looking for four things. They want someone who is a fast learner, so ability to learn, and speed of learning, so speed. And the third would be problem solvers, curious minds, and they're also looking for technology skills. Now, a lot of these things aren't traditionally coming out the education system as we know it, and I agree that I think we need a radical rethink and reshape of the education system, but also of policies that are enabling people to learn. How are we giving people permission to learn at every age and stage of their career, from the age of 7 up to the age of 70? Because formalized learning officially in your early 20s. So if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond, where do you go if you suddenly want to upskill or reskill? If you are that bus driver, and I believe that transformation is possible, how can you fund your learning? How can you find the time for your learning? And that is where government does need to step in. Government needs to be visionary about the future of work. It needs to set a vision for what that looks like and match it with policies. And those education policies and funding policies. Singapore's done it with their skills credits.
Yep.
Increasingly, other governments are doing it. Finland just offered free AI courses to every single citizen in that country. So the UK can be doing more.
Yeah, I was unfortunate enough to be speaking at a conference straight after the Minister for Trade for Singapore and tried to say, well, okay, so you've actually sorted out and we've got a lot to do, so it was interesting. Nigel, do you see this kind of dynamism of policy that Catherine's talking about as possible? I mean, you do a lot with government, you do a lot in AI. Yeah. I mean, are we in the right place? Are we getting these ducks lined up?
Well, I certainly think that the view that our educational system is a matter of national security and national well-being, I just think we really have to be much more ambitious about equipping our state system with the skills and talents to really let our kids flourish. I just think that's so important. I think on the other side of it, where do we have the ambition? I think we have the creative talents. The thing is, we're going to be elbowed aside by a bunch of algorithms. A great human talent is the context machine that we are, that we have this sense of emotional and human intelligence, of an embedding in a social environment where those nuances, what it is to be human, to care for, to matter, to be alive, these are essential human qualities. It may sound a bit high blown. I believe the argument's got to shift away from sheer monetization. There's a huge problem, I think, about eliminating the free riders from the system, the amount of wealth being generated to relatively few companies, and the ability of states to get back some of that to spend for their kind of public purposes. That's a real challenge. But I think the notion of what we equip ourselves to do in the future, how we take ourselves forward on that journey, that's terribly exciting. I mean, I look at it with my own students. There's extraordinary appetite, and we're a very inventive and ingenious nation, race, capability. But it will come back to values. The values that I think we stand for they go back to the Enlightenment. They're around self-determination, the importance of individual autonomy, the importance of privacy. You don't give up on those. I think that when we get into the argument around sovereign AI or sovereign this, let's think about the values that we want to kind of promote within our educational system and not just think about shareholder value.
And, you know, that kind of not giving up is an important part. I mean, Peter, in your day, there was a lot of work around things like sector skills councils and, you know, trying to very actively manage the skills base, manage the, you know, where we were on the population. But, of course, most of that has changed several times over the last period. And, you know, with all due respect, many politicians are looking for the next thing to announce. But isn't this too important for that? Don't we really need some long-term, universally agreed policies that say, in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, UK is going to be the most skilled, capable, enabled, available, you know, country in the world? I mean, what can we do about that?
I think the problem with many politicians and policymakers is that they're not looking at the next phase and things that are going to happen, that are going to be invented, or the changes that are going to take place. They're far, far too busy catching up with what's already happened and looking through a rear view mirror in order to adjust their policies, in order to cater for a set of conditions which are already becoming out of date. That is the problem with policy making. I mean, I'm Chancellor of a university in Manchester, which is creating now a school of digital arts. It's bringing all the arts themes of academic themes and activity together with the digital age, and just looking at the whole new ways in which storytelling is going to take place in the future. We started off calling it a screen school. Forget it. Screens, you know, hello. Now, if this is how, you know, I mean, universities are sort of relatively agile institutions. Let's not overstate it or make too many claims. You can imagine what it's like when it comes to government. I mean, they are just far too slothful. There's no sort of fleet of foot when it comes to policy making. There has to be a completely transformative view by government of how work, what form of work, what sources of work, how people will be working. But you know, one thing we do know, already see, is that you know, people will be gigging in the economy far more. There will be a lot more temporary or casual or short-term and also low-paid work. Now, somehow, policy has to come to terms with that. You said, and I completely understand why you're skeptical of a universal basic income. I first started talking about universal basic income and engaging in this debate as a policymaker in politics in the 1980s, end of the 1970s, and actually fast sort of concluded that, you know, that it was, you know, at best interesting and at worst completely unaffordable. But that was long before the changes that have taken place in the world of work, which you've seen now. I do think we do have to think completely outside of the box. And the challenge for the tech sector, and I say this to everyone who's here this afternoon, in my experience of government, policymakers' attitude to technology goes through 3 phases. First of all, there's a great excitement, a great welcome and embrace, and a great buzz that takes place. Second phase is, hold on a moment, what's happening here? Serious policy concerns growing, and then you read them in policy making journals and in the media, a lot of negative images and vibes, and people start thinking, hold on here, don't quite really understand or don't much like the way things are going. And then you reach the third phase, which is sort of panic, a sort of headlong rush into what new laws can be pumped out and imposed on the technology sector. And I would say that AI is somewhere around the second, the serious concerns, moving reasonably rapidly to the third, the imposition of new laws. Now, in my view, the tech sector, if I can use that shorthand phrase, has either got to be sort of anticipating this process, which I've just described, engaging with it, thinking ahead, working out and identifying where the obligations, where the responsibilities of the tech sector lay in relation to the rest of society. Obviously, there are ethical concerns and issues arising over the collection and protection and sharing of data. That is obvious. But there are also wider concerns, as we've been discussing this afternoon, about the future of work. And my message is very simply this: anticipate, don't get dragged along, engage enthusiastically, don't be forced to the well to drink water. And thirdly, use your ingenuity, which is huge, in order to go ahead of the policymakers to work out what some of the answers and what some of the solutions are. Don't wait around, don't hang around until all the solutions, which are no doubt already out of date by the time they've been promulgated, are then imposed on you. That's not the way to go, in my view.
No, and that's an important point. I mean, the technology industry will be fundamentally limited if it doesn't get ahead of the discussion. I mean, it needs to be there saying, we understand there's going to be impacts, but what can we do about it? I mean, Jamie, in your writing and speaking, you've talked a lot about, the next generation of things that are happening, embedded technology and, smarter capabilities and so on, as well as the sort of quantified nature of our lives and so on. So, I mean, how do you feel about that ability? And you have tried to propose some solutions around how policy could be formulated more quickly, how it could be more dynamic. I mean, what do we need to think about as this audience here, this industry, as well as the policymakers and influencers at this point?
Well, I'll try and summarize it. My own view is that the economic slice of the pie, which we're talking about just now, is only one of a much bigger set of challenges that we're facing because of new technology. I think that it is going to cause massive concentrations of political power. New technologies are going to have the possibility of affecting the quality of our democracy, matters of social justice when it comes to algorithmic discrimination, questions of liberty, what we may and may not do with the technologies that we use. And I don't think we are close to the playing field when it comes to developing even the political ideas, let alone the laws and solutions that we need. When it comes to revert back to today's theme, the future of work, I think it's helpful to distinguish between 2 periods. And here I'm borrowing from Daniel Susskind in his terminology. There's a period of frictional technological unemployment where there are enough jobs to go around, but that the people who are made unemployed are unable to fill those jobs, either because they're in the wrong geographical location or because they don't have the skills. And there are things that we can do to ameliorate frictional unemployment, and I'm sitting on stage with some of the people who know most about that. The question is then whether there's a second stage in the longer term, and we are talking the much longer term here, life cycle rather than economic cycle, where even the new jobs that technologies generate, and technologies do definitely generate new jobs as well as destroying them, but where even those jobs are done better by non-human systems than by human beings themselves, such that there is structurally embedded in the economy an impossibility of full work. But that doesn't mean that the economy is shrinking. It means, in fact, that the economy is likely to be growing. It's just that the proceeds of that growth are being channeled towards a smaller and smaller group of people who own and control the very productive technologies that are replacing human labor. And I don't think there's any escaping the fact that those entities, those companies who are manufacturing technologies which may displace the livelihoods of millions of people, may ultimately have to be the ones responsible for making sure that people can still make a living in some way or other, whether that's through a robot tax of the kind proposed by Bill Gates, whether it's the questions of ownership such that massively powerful technology should be, if not nationalized, made available to entrepreneurs, even those who don't own them, whether it's data commonses, such that the data in a country is not gathered and hoarded by one particular company, but is made available for entrepreneurs to generate new technologies from all over the place. We need to think entirely differently about the economy as it currently exists. And it is both distressing and concerning, I think, to hear Lord Mandelson say that politicians are often fighting the last battle. This is a time where we cannot...
Does that surprise you?
It doesn't at all. I make the argument myself, but it's nice to hear it coming from someone who actually knows. The risk is we get distracted by these problems that seem very big, and they are, Brexit and the like. But the bigger challenges looming on the horizon could be as transformative for us as the invention of writing.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, to Peter's point, Andrew, you're making, I think the time for leadership is now, for people to stand up and show the vision of what we can do. But, I mean, Nigel, we're seeing this kind of, discussion frequently, as Jamie just described. There will be widespread effect. There's no doubt about it. There's capability here that's significant. There's control in maybe a small number of hands and so on. I mean, have you seen any good examples of where people have started to grapple with this effectively, where somewhere we could start to learn about the way to balance the regulation, the taxation, and the other sorts of things that we potentially need to put in place?
Well, look, one thing I will revert back to, because it's a long-standing kind of passion of both Tim Berners-Lee and myself, is this whole argument around open data. Now, it's a little bit out of fashion at the moment, the idea that what are we doing, kind of data's an asset, people want to control it, but the idea that there's huge amounts of data generated that is non-personal, that could have a public good associated with it, that in some cases is related to a whole range of services that we pay for in our taxation, whether it's geospatial data, whether it's the data about our schools, the performance of our health system, whatever it is, that we have done only the beginnings of a job on opening that data up, because that is great innovative grist to the economy. We have seen jobs and startups created over those initiatives. And what applies to that piece of the data spectrum applies right across it. I think we need to really think about working much more imaginatively about how we can release and make available data commons. Actually, Jamie referenced this. New ways of thinking about this resource as a public good as well as a private good.
Yeah, and Catherine, again, just from the kind of global perspective, this is it's a competition. Really, we obviously want the economy generally to prevail, but ultimately, if we don't get our country, our workforce, our society in the shape that we need to do, nobody's sitting around waiting for us to do that. And you must see in other countries, Singapore you mentioned, but there are many others who are being very active about getting things in place. Now, any examples you could cite of that you've seen that have been quite interesting?
Well, I do think, I know that CogX is really involved with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. A lot of different countries are getting behind those. In the absence of political vision, we have these UN Sustainable Development Goals, and what they're essentially setting is a series of problems that we want to solve. And it is a renaissance. We are living in this new kind of enlightenment. The tools, the technology, the skills, the data now exist to solve these problems in ways that were previously unimaginable. But I'm a believer that if you give people the permission to learn, you give them the freedom, the time, the resources that they need, they will be able to solve those problems. And I think that's where government can step in. So they can step in by creating the right policies to allow people to fund their lifelong learning and the permission to actually take the time that is needed to do that. So what problems do we want to solve?
No, I agree. And it is definitely that challenge, that sense of giving people some hope. My mythical lorry driver in Sunderland, not necessarily saying he or she is going to retrain, but, the fact that they have some hope that their children are going to have jobs and that, you know, we've got something set up that means people can skill themselves and reskill themselves in a much more dynamic way than you do today. But I'm not sure we're getting that vision articulated particularly clearly at the moment, which is a shame, really, because I think that's what we need, is that communication and open vision at the moment. Sadly, I think we've, you know, despite the topic of solving the world and the future of work, I think there'll be a lot more discussion on this at CogX, actually doing a session on Wednesday around the future of education, which I'm sure will cover a number of similar things. But I'm sorry to say that we have run out of time for the moment. So, you know, Lord Mandelson, Jamie, Peter, and Catherine, thank you very much for that. And please, if you could just put your hands together, that'd be great. Thank you.